Hi everyone, hope you're all doing well. Welcome to another devlog for Lumbermill, a factory builder and management game I've been building for a while now. This time around, I've been largely focusing on the game's visuals, improving a lot of the areas that were in need of an upgrade. The first of these is the Conveyor Belts. The design itself works, but causes a lot of issues that need to be addressed. The first is they're just not wide enough. They use a very small area of the tile, meaning any items travelling along them have to be even smaller. This is really restrictive for item designs, and I'd love to include more detailed objects in the game. I started by watching a bunch of sawmill videos for inspiration. If anyone likes how it's made videos, these are really cool to watch. The main things I found were that conveyor belts in sawmills tend to come in two main varieties, chain conveyors and rubber belts. I decided to just get the basic frame design down first before committing to either of these two styles. This is very much inspired by the old conveyor design, just with a more sturdy, wider shape. The downside of this is I'll need to redesign the machines to fit the new shape, but I reckon they can be improved too. With the shape down, I tried the chain design first. This was not ideal to animate due to the small size of the chain, and at first looked like this in the game. I decided to reduce it down to a single chain, as it kinda looked like a pair of tyre treads. With that done, I sliced the animation into frames in Unity, set up the prefab, and didn't really love the way it looked. I really missed the red arrows of the old design. They indicated direction well and just suited the more colourful style of the game. So I went back to the pixel art drawing board, drew some larger arrows than the old design, and added dividing lines to indicate joins in the rubber. This just helps with the animation movement rather than just having the arrows moving. When I got that into Unity, it looked a lot better than the chains, but there were some issues with the joins between the conveyor objects. I recorded that to play it back in super slow-mo and just had to make some adjustments to the animations. With that sorted, I was really happy with the new design. It's much cleaner than the original wooden frame. Convinced by this final design, I went ahead and drew the rest of the frame shapes. There are two belt objects on each conveyor, one which handles the east-west animation and another for north-south. This just makes the process of combining the animations in corners much easier. I got the game selecting the correct direction for each conveyor, though still had to sort out the overlapping edges. The first attempt at this used two masks which combined to create the overall effect. I ended up scrapping this in favour of separate animations for each conveyor shape, mostly for performance reasons, but also because the masks caused issues for objects on the conveyors. 3 animations in total for each direction, short, mid-length and full length. At that point, I had a day where I just didn't feel like doing any programming. I went for a long walk to get conveyor belts out of my head before deciding to just sit down and draw some concept art. An idea that's been floating around for a while is to potentially put the forest on an island, large enough to build a decent factory on, of course, mainly to make the world edges a bit more interesting, rather than the slightly depressing void. Before you start thinking of tropical islands, which definitely wouldn't suit the style or setting of this game, the idea of Canadian islands with a colder climate could really introduce a lot of interesting gameplay concepts. I won't go into them in this video as this is still very much a concept for now, but if you have any ideas of what this could add to the game, let me know in the comments. This is really not for certain, as I'd like to figure out the reasoning for everything first, but this design is a proof of concept. I messed around a lot with the colours for this, eventually reaching this design. I think it blends really well with the style of the game, and I'd love to start introducing details like the flowers and fallen log, just to make the forest feel a bit more alive. So, having had a day off, you might have noticed in the last devlog that I'd run out of space in the build menu. The power tab, which I added in the last video, went off the edge. I could have made some small design changes, but instead took the opportunity to improve things. The game has outgrown the old interface in a lot of ways. The build menu requires a lot of unnecessary clicks and blocks the view of the player whenever it's open. I wanted to make things more scalable for the growing list of options and improve the experience for the player. I made a mock-up in Affinity Designer just to be able to easily move stuff around and try design ideas. The info bar at the bottom of the screen is going, with the key information moving to the top of the screen where it's a bit more visible. I also designed a bunch of icons to be used in the new build menu for each category. The build menu will move to the bottom of the screen with the categories easily accessible at all times, represented by the coloured icons. These colours are then lent to a new notification system, with parts of the notification highlighted by colour category, so you can see at a glance what the notification is about. I've also changed the main colours a bit to make them a bit warmer and added outlines to a lot of the elements. With the mockup done, the first thing I decided to implement was the new amber monitor. Based on the mockup, I set up the layout and created the necessary scripts to begin coding. Whenever you spend money, the monitor extends underneath to show you how much money you've spent. With a bit of extra work, I got that animated. It'll stay open and keep counting until you've stopped building. With that working and a newfound addiction for animated UI, I created the date monitor next. For the time controls, I decided to get a hang of tweening, a form of animation that doesn't require an animated component and is now my favourite thing in Unity. I'm using DoTween here, which I got on sale a few months ago. I just added a subtle bounce for each arrow as you adjust the speed. I discovered you can do this entirely with code, rather than adding a component an hour or so later. At that point, it was time to say goodbye to the faithful info bar, which was probably the first thing I ever added to the game. If you'd like to pay your respects in the comments, feel free. So I got to work on creating the layout for the build menu. This took a little while as I wanted to be careful to create a layout that will work on as many screens as possible. I tested that in play mode just to check everything was scaled correctly before getting to work on the code. Next up, I chose some colours for the icons and added an animation to the interface for opening and closing. At first, that didn't entirely go to plan. I decided that the icons were too low resolution and the colours looked like a toy box. After a bit of tweaking in Sprite to double the resolution of the icons, I arrived at this result. Objects are filtered by category, buttons are animated, and to prevent the colours being too overwhelming, they're just shown when a category is selected or hovered over. I then returned the grass sprite under each item to keep the resemblance to the old interface, before adding some more animations to the build options themselves to make clicking them a bit more satisfying. The first attempt adjusted the scale of the entire option, which distorted the pixel art, so after another few mistakes, I ended up with this. An outline grows and shrinks around each item as you hover over them, and the entire interface disappears if you click the currently selected category a second time. The final task, as always, was just a bit more art, adding some shadows to the conveyor belt animations. The end result of everything for this week was this. The game looks and feels considerably better now, and it was about time the game got animated conveyors. If you'd like the game when it's out, head over to Steam and add it to your wishlist. You'll be notified when it's out, and every wishlist helps me to get more exposure on release. If you'd like to support development, I have a Patreon with a bunch of Lumbermill related rewards. Special thanks for this video, of course, go to my patrons, and in particular, I'd like to thank Julian, Ismail, Ethan Hart, Cameron E, Ekapivol, Cameron W, Glenn Lamberts, Phil, Joshua, Logan, Pepe BNT, Pepra Trollman, Gecko, Hayden, Sheshpesh, Nova, and Alex. That's all for this week. If you liked the video, remember to like it, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks very much for watching, and I shall see you next time.